Solving linear equations. The whole goal when you solve an equation is to get the variable by itself. Isolate the variable. That means get it by itself. The way you do that is with the inverse operation. So when I have x plus 3 equals 7, the inverse of plus 3 is minus 3. What I'm going to do is get the variable by itself, get rid of the plus 3, with the inverse, subtract 3. So on each side I would subtract 3. And x then, because this would be gone, 3 minus 3 is 0, x would be 7 minus 3, which is 4. Notice that we can plug in 4 and see that it works. If we take and put a 4 in place of x, 4 plus 3 is of course 7. For the next one to the right, x minus 10 equals negative 3. The inverse of subtract 10 is add 10. So to get x by itself, I would add 10 to both sides, and these would drop out, and x would be by itself, and negative 3 plus 10 is positive 7, and x would be 7. Below, I have negative 3x equals 18. When you say negative 3x, that's the coefficient, negative 3 is, and there's always multiplication between a coefficient and a variable. To get rid of multiplication, we use the inverse operation. The inverse operation of multiply is divide. So I divide both sides by negative 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive, because two negatives when you divide make a positive, positive 1. And 1x, that's just x, 1x and x are the same thing, equals 18 divided by negative 3, which is negative 6. So that equation has x equal negative 6 as an answer. The next one, x divided by 7 equals negative 4. Again, I use the inverse operation to get x by itself. To get rid of divided by 7, I would take each side and multiply by 7. Now, when you have a fraction, you treat 7 like 7 over 1, because 7 divided by 1 is 7. It's the same thing. And then these cancel, because it's 7 divided by 7, which is 1. And 1x is x. It's the same thing as x. And negative 4 times 7 is negative 28. That means x equals negative 28. For this last one, I need to get x by itself, and it takes a couple of steps. The last thing you get rid of is the coefficient. Right here, that's the last thing I do. In general, I'll get the variable term by itself, that's the 2x. So the first thing I do is get rid of that subtraction by 9. I add 9 to both sides. And that drops out, and I get 2x equals negative 11 plus 9 is negative 2. Now I'm going to take that 2x equals negative 2, and remember there's times there. To get rid of multiply, we divide. So I divide by 2, and x will be negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Next thing we're going to do is look at questions off your assignment. Here we see an equation, and notice that there are variables on both sides. You can't get the variable by itself if it's on both sides. The goal is to get the variable by itself. If it's in two places, that's not possible. And there's an equals between them. When there's an equals between them, I can do things to both sides, just like we did in the previous examples. I subtracted 9 or added 10 to both sides. Here what I can do is subtract 3y. And the reason that works is 3y minus 3y is 0, it's gone. And notice I'm left with 4y equals 36. I have the variable on one side and the number, the 36, on the other. This means I can eliminate the 4 by just dividing by 4. And these cancel. 1y is what I have there. 1y is y. And 36 divided by 4 is 9. So y equals 9. So when there are variables on both sides, get rid of one of them, do the same thing to both sides, Get the variable by itself. Here's another question with variables on both sides. A lot of times students see the plus 5 and they subtract 5 from both sides, or they see the plus 11 and they subtract 11 from both sides. Both of those are correct steps. But in general, to avoid confusion, I always recommend doing the variables first. So you have two options here. You can subtract 8u from both sides. Now notice if I take 8u from both sides, 6 minus 8, 6u minus 8u will be negative 2u. And that's okay. I could do that. But if you want to keep things positive, it is possible here. Rather than subtract 8u, you could subtract 6u. And 8u minus 6u is positive. Does this matter? No. Either way would have worked fine. But here I would get 2u plus 11. These drop out, and there's a 5. Now the goal is to get the u by itself. The first thing I do is get the 2u by itself, because the last thing I'm going to do is divide by 2. Get rid of the coefficient last. So let's get rid of the plus 11 with a minus 11. 5 minus 11, 5 is smaller than 11, that's negative 6. Now there's times between the 2 and the u, and I'm going to use the inverse operation. The inverse of multiply is divide. So I divide by 2, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and when you have one negative, your answer is negative. If you have two negatives and you're dividing and multiplying, you get a positive. Here's a question where we have the distributive property. See the parentheses? That is 5 times the parentheses. And when I have a number out front of parentheses, it affects every number inside. It's 5 times u and 5 times 7. And the plus is what will go between them. If that was a minus, then there'd be a minus between them. So this is 11 equals 5 times u is 5u, which is still 5 times u, by the way. 5 times 7 is 35. And then I have that minus 8u afterward. Only what's in the parentheses gets multiplied by 5. Now notice, look at this one side. There are things I can combine. I'm not doing things to both sides. My equal is right there. There are things that can be combined or simplified over here. 5u minus 8u, 5 minus 8 is negative 3u plus 35 equals 11. That's called simplifying or combining like terms. Now I'm going to get the negative 3u by itself, and the last thing I'll do is divide by negative 3. Get rid of the coefficient last. So to get the variable by itself, I first of all subtract 35. And 11 minus 35, get out the calculator, is negative 24. So negative 24 equals negative 3u. Again, there's times. You get rid of times, I divide. Get the variable by itself. And u will equal, now I'm flipping this around, these cancel, and negative 24 divided by negative 3 is positive 8. So u equals 8. Here's another one with parentheses. We can distribute negative 2 to both. Negative 2 times w is negative 2w. Now, notice the plus. Negative 2 times positive 5 is negative 10. Now, you could write plus negative 10, and that would be perfectly okay. But you can also write minus 10, and that's the same thing. So either plus negative 10 or minus 10. Notice there are variables on both sides. Always take care of that first. So I have two options. To get rid of one of the variables, I use the inverse operation. Either I'm going to add 2w to both sides to get rid of negative 2w. And this would work fine. But notice that negative 5w plus 2w is negative 3w. So we could keep things positive, and again, it doesn't matter. Either way is fine. Rather than add 2w, let's add 5w. But either way would work fine. These drop out. Negative 2 plus 5 is positive 3w minus 10 equals negative 1. I'm going to get the 3w by itself. That way I can divide by 3 as my last step. So to get the 3w by itself, we'll add 10. 3w equals 9. Now this is 3 times w. To get rid of multiply, we divide. So we'll divide both sides by 3. Those cancels. That's now 1w. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1w is the same thing as w. So this is w equals 9 divided by 3 is 3. Last one. This has some simplifying in it too. The first thing we're going to do though is distribute. We'll take the negative 6 to both inside the parentheses and take the 5 times both inside the parentheses. Negative 6 times 2x is negative 12x. Negative 6 times negative 3, it's a negative times a negative, which makes a positive, positive 18, plus 3x equals, now take the 5 to both. 5 times x is 5x. It's still 5 times x. And 5 times 6 is 30. Now, before you do things to both sides, notice how there are 3 terms over here. Terms are separated by addition, subtraction. Negative 12x, 18, and 3x. Whenever you have 3 terms, that means there's got to be stuff that you can simplify, you can combine together. Negative 12x plus 3x is negative 9x plus 18 equals 5x plus 30. You have 2 options here. You can either add positive 9x to both sides to get rid of the negative 9x, or you can subtract 5x from both sides. Now notice, if I subtract 5x, and it would work fine, I just have to be careful, that negative 9 minus 5x would be negative 14x. And I think students are more likely to make a mistake there because things are negative. You don't have to deal with that if you don't want to. My suggestion is let's keep things positive and get rid of the negative 9 by adding 9x to both sides. Less likely to make a sign error that way. So that becomes 0, and we get 18 equals 14x plus 30. We can get the x by itself. First of all, we get the 14x by itself, so we can divide by 14. We'll take a 30 off each side. 18 minus 30 is negative 12. Notice the 18 is smaller than 30. And negative 12 equals 14x. Now I can get the variable by itself by just dividing by 14. This isn't a real friendly answer. Negative 12 over 14. It's a fraction. The last thing we need to do is look at our numerator and denominator, the top and the bottom, and make sure there's no common factors. There's no number that divides into both of them. We're going to reduce this fraction, simplify the fraction, and they're both divisible by 2. They're both even. So I'm going to divide them both by 2, and 12 divided by 2 is 6, so that's negative 6. 14 divided by 2 is 7, and so there's our answer, negative 6/7.